Rosaline became an orphan in Korea and had nothing but a broken past and a fire in her soul. Now, she's marrying one of the most powerful men in the country. But not for love, for revenge. What happens when buried secrets, forbidden desires, and a motive no one talks about begin to rise to the surface? This isn't just a love story. It's payback in disguise. Stay tuned to enjoy this story. Rosaline, a Nigerian orphan surviving in Korea. Her parent died when she was 10, and she lived in an orphanage home. She grew up and once worked for a gang doing petty jobs. But she has one rule: never killing. When asked to kill, she left the gang and became a solo burglar. One rainy night, she found a stranded man, Junho, robbed and homeless. Believing he was a lost foreigner, she helped him and gave him shelter. She brought him into her burglary lifestyle under one rule: never hurt or kill anyone. Unknown to her, Junho was the son of Senator Kang Joram, one of Korea's wealthiest and most feared political moguls. He had left home to escape his father's iron grip, but after being robbed, his bank accounts were frozen by his father. They became partners in crime and in love, until Junho broke the rule and shot someone during a heist. Rosaline was caught on CCTV and arrested. Junho promised to help her using his father's influence if she took the fall. Out of love, she agreed, but he abandoned her. She spent 5 years in prison, bitter and forgotten. 5 years. That's how long Rosaline had spent behind cold, forgotten walls. Not just in prison, but in the prison of betrayal. Every ticking second inside that cell had carved something into her: silence, bitterness, and a kind of focus that only revenge could sharpen. They called her foreign trash. They thought she'd be broken, but Rosaline didn't bend. She counted her time like a debt Kang Junho owed her. When she stepped into the sunlight for the first time in half a decade, the world felt unfamiliar. Seoul had moved on. The skyline was brighter, the people colder, the streets faster. But one thing hadn't changed: her mission. She didn't waste a moment. With the last 10,000 Korean wons the prison gave her, Rosaline found a dingy internet cafe downtown. The neon signs flickered like ghosts from her past. She sat down, opened the browser, and typed his name with trembling fingers. Kang Junho. And there he was, smiling, groomed, draped in wealth and charm. The man who once had nothing was now everything. But the headline twisted the knife. Kang Junho, heir of Senator Kang Joram, to wed Korea's sweetheart actress Han So-yeon this weekend. Rosaline's throat tightened. She leaned back in her chair, not out of defeat, but disbelief and fury. He had promised to come for her. He said he'd protect her. Instead, he let her rot while he rose. She clicked the image of him in a tuxedo, hand wrapped around his bride-to-be. Her jaw clenched. He looked happy, fulfilled, untouched by the ruin he left behind. But that would change. She was going to the wedding, not as a guest, but as the woman who would turn his perfect world into dust. And this time, she wasn't playing by the rules. The wedding was lavish. A castle-like venue nestled in the hills of Gangnam. Lights strung from rooftop to rooftop. Cameras flashing like thunder. Korea's elite had gathered to celebrate a love Rosaline knew was built on lies. She wore a simple black dress, blending into the crowd like a ghost from a forgotten past. From a distance, she watched Kang Junho smile, so charming, so confident. He kissed his bride's hand. The guests clapped. The media swooned. But Rosaline's heart was thudding, slow and heavy, like a war drum. "He doesn't know I'm here," she whispered to herself. "Not yet." Every second fueled her rage, and in her thirst for numbness, she wandered to the open bar. That's where she saw a man in his late 50s, eyes red from liquor, his suit wrinkled, his soul heavier than his glass. She sat beside him without a word. Misery attracts misery. They drank in silence. Then they talked, the way strangers do, without filters or fear. He spoke of betrayal, of a son who had become a stranger. She spoke of regret, of wasted love. Neither of them recognized the other. Until dawn broke. Rosaline woke up in a strange hotel room, his jacket draped over her heart slamming as the truth unfolded. She had let him browse her internet. "What have I done?" she hissed. "Who even are you?" The man turned to her, calm and unapologetic. "I should be asking you that," he said. "But I'll ask something else." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a card. Senator Kang Joram. Rosaline's heart stopped. And then came the shock. "Marry me." Rosaline's brow furrowed. "What?" Joram didn't blink. "You and I both know what's at stake. My career cannot afford rumors of an affair with a foreign woman. Let's cut the scandal off at the root." Rosaline's lips parted in disbelief. "You want to marry me, to clean up a rumor?" He nodded. "It'll be a contract. 3 years. I'll provide you with a monthly allowance, a luxury apartment, and a golden visa. You'll play the role of my dignified wife in public. In private, we'll live our separate lives." She laughed dryly. "So I'm just a pawn?" "No," he replied coolly. "You're an investment." Rosaline's eyes lowered to the envelope he slid across the table, an official marriage agreement and a check with more zeros than she'd ever seen in her life. For a moment, she hesitated. She could walk away, live a quiet life, forget the pain. But then, his face flickered in her mind. Junho, the man who had lied, the man who had used her, the man who left her to rot in a prison cell for a crime she didn't commit. Her hands trembled as she picked up the pen. She didn't care about love anymore. Not after what Junho did. This wasn't about healing. It was about justice. Cold, personal, undeniable. She looked up and smiled faintly. "Fine, I'll be your wife." Senator Kang extended his hand. "Welcome to the family." On her way back to find her home, she bought a phone and searched for his name, and she realized she had just shared her night with Junho's father. She shook her head. Is this fate? If only the father knew. He wasn't saving his legacy. He was handing her the weapon to destroy his son. The mansion gates opened slowly, like the beginning of a silent war. Rosaline stepped out of the black car with her chin held high, dressed in an elegant white hanbok infused with soft African patterns. Her presence alone shifted the atmosphere. Cameras flashed. The media whispered. Senator Kang's new fiancé was not Korean. That was scandal enough. Inside the marble hall, the air was tight. Seoul's upper class sat in golden chairs, sipping champagne and gossiping beneath their breath. Senator Kang cleared his throat on the podium, smiling politely. "Thank you all for coming. Today, I introduce to you my bride-to-be." He turned toward Rosaline, reaching for her hand. Gasps filled the room. A murmur rippled through the crowd like thunder under silk. Faces turned pale. Murmurs turned to whispers. And somewhere in the back, Kang Junho froze. His wine glass tilted in his hand, shattering on the floor. His eyes met Rosaline's, and for 1 second, she allowed herself to feel it, the raw, burning pain he left her with. But just as quickly, she replaced it with a soft, graceful smile. A performance, a warning. Junho staggered back, confused, furious. Was this a coincidence, or a cruel twist of fate? Rosaline gently bowed with perfect poise beside the senator. Her voice rang clearly into the microphone. "It is an honor to stand by this man's side," she said, "and I hope the public will support our union with kindness and grace." Applause followed. Shallow, uncertain. Junho stormed out, heart racing. He didn't know how she got here, or why she was standing beside his father. But he knew one thing. Rosaline was back, and she had a plan. Junho barged into his father's private study, his jaw tight with anger. The heavy door shut behind him with a bang. Senator Kang, dressed in his custom navy hanbok, barely looked up as he sipped from a crystal glass of whiskey. "I heard the news," Junho muttered, fighting to control his breathing. "You're marrying her." Senator Kang set the glass down slowly. "It's for the greater good. The media is thirsty for blood. A wedding, calms the waves. Junho scoffed. You barely know her. I know enough, the senator replied coolly, eyes narrowing. And I know she fits the image I want. Quiet, educated, exotic. Junho turned away to hide the storm in his eyes. He couldn't tell his father the truth, that Rosaline was his past, his heartbreak, his first love. Senator Kang raised a brow. She's not your concern. Junho laughed bitterly, pacing like a madman. Senator Kang stepped forward, voice lowering. I am in control here. Junho's breath caught in his throat. I've already instructed the team to erase what they can. The internet forgets if you pay it enough. She's not a puppet, Appa, Junho said softly. No, she's a solution, Senator Kang snapped. And I don't want any of your emotional distractions ruining this. Junho bit his tongue. He wanted to scream, but if he told the truth now, everything would unravel. His father's pride would twist it into something political. He stormed out again, anger clouding his mind. How could Rosaline do this? Had their time together meant so little? Meanwhile, Rosaline sat alone in her new room, a suite with gold-trimmed mirrors and silk curtains. She stared at her reflection, recalling the look on Junho's face, the pain, the betrayal. She whispered to herself, now you feel it, don't you? The confusion, the humiliation, just like I did. But even she couldn't deny the ache twisting inside her chest. Revenge had a taste, sharp, addictive, but it wasn't as sweet as she expected. Rosaline was no longer the shy, starry-eyed girl who once held his hand in secret. She was something else now, sharp, unreadable, powerful. And now, his father's fiancée? His fingers trembled as he reached for the glass of water by his bedside. Empty. He threw off the sheets and marched to the kitchen, his thoughts louder than his footsteps. The woman he once abandoned had returned like a storm. He didn't know whether to run or to face it head-on. Elsewhere in the mansion, Rosaline sat on the floor of her temporary bedroom, hair down, eyes locked on an old, faded photo. It was a picture taken during their first month together, a rare smile on Junho's face, his hand holding Hayes tightly. She didn't cry. She couldn't. The tears had dried years ago. Now, it was time to play her role with perfect grace and precise revenge. The next morning came too early for Junho. He hadn't slept. Instead, he stayed at the news article his assistant forwarded, Senator Kim to marry mysterious Nigerian beauty. His chest tightened. He wasn't ready for this war. That evening, Rosaline walked down the grand staircase in a floor-length emerald gown, the fabric hugging her curves with quiet authority. Her skin glowed under the chandelier lights, and her expression was poised but unreadable. She knew Junho would be at the table. She made show of it. Senator Kim stood from his chair, clapping lightly. You look stunning, my dear. Rosaline smiled gracefully. Thank you, sir. Junho, seated at the far end of the dining table, stared at his wine glass as if it could rescue him. He hadn't spoken a word since she walked in. The air between them thickened with unspoken history. Dinner was served, steak, steamed vegetables, and wine poured into crystal glasses. The senator discussed political affairs, charity events, and the wedding plans. Rosaline responded with calm precision, impressing him with her poise and intelligence. Junho excused himself halfway through dessert. He couldn't take the way she ignored him, like he was a stranger. As he passed behind her, Rosaline leaned back ever so slightly and whispered, "Running again." He froze for half a second, then walked on, fists clenched. After dinner, Senator Kim led Rosaline to the study. He handed her a slim folder. "These are background checks and online articles that mentioned your past," he said gently. "We've made sure they are scrubbed from the internet. You're going to start clean." Rosaline's fingers tightened on the folder. "Thank you. But I need you to keep it that way. No surprises, no scandals. You're not just marrying me. You're entering a legacy." "I understand," she replied smoothly, but inside, her heart beat like a war drum. They had erased her past, but her pain remained alive, and her revenge was only just beginning. Junho thought he had mastered every form of self-control. Boardrooms, negotiations, scandal containment. He'd face pressure most men would crumble under. But nothing prepared him for the way Rosaline moved through that house. Each morning, she came down the grand staircase like a vision. Silk blouses that clung to her form. Skirts that ended just high enough to be distracting but never inappropriate. Her walk was elegant, slow, confident, a silent reminder that she knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't dressing for the cameras. She was dressing for him, and it was working. At breakfast, she was the perfect bride-to-be, laughing softly at the senator's stories, discussing wedding themes with calm precision. But now and then, just as she reached for her cup or brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, she would glance at Junho, her eyes lingering just a second longer than they should. That second always left him breathless. He told himself it was nothing, a mind trick, a remnant of their past. But each time she passed him in the hallway, her perfume, warm vanilla and danger, wrapped around his senses. She didn't speak to him often, but when she did, her words were laced with amusement and something else he couldn't name. At night, he found himself restless, thinking about her, remembering how things used to be, and hating how much he still wanted her. One evening, he walked into the library, only to find her curled in the velvet armchair, reading quietly. Her legs were crossed elegantly, the slit in her skate teasing more than it should. "I see you've made yourself comfortable," he said, his voice lower than intended. Without looking up, she replied, "Why? Are you uncomfortable?" His heart pounded. He took a step closer. "You're doing this on purpose." Now, she looked up. Her expression was unreadable. "And if I am?" That silence between them stretched long and thin. Junho couldn't speak, couldn't move. She had become the storm he couldn't outrun, the one woman who saw straight through him and still held all the power. He left the room without another word. But he knew the truth now. Rosaline wasn't just haunting him. She was undoing him. Piece by piece, Junho couldn't sleep. Every time he shut his eyes, memories clawed their way to the surface, not of the woman living under the same roof with him now, but of the girl he had left behind 5 years ago. He hadn't meant to abandon her. That night, the night everything changed, he was ready to come forward, to confess, to protect her. But everything had spun out of his control. His father had frozen his accounts without warning, and he was running a political election. He did not want to spoil his reputation. "You're too reckless," Chairman Han had said coldly. "Until you prove you can make wise decisions, starting with marrying the right woman, you won't have access to a single one." Junho had pleaded, but his father was immovable, and time was against him. The scandal was already brewing. Rosaline had been convicted. His father told him to get married before he could have access to his property, or lose it all. He'd chosen survival, and in doing so, he'd sacrificed the one woman who had truly loved him. Now she was back, but not as his lover, as his future stepmother, and she had no idea why he had left. Each day in the mansion was torment. Rosaline floated through the halls with the poise of a queen and the eyes of a woman who had learned never to trust again. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't ask why he'd betrayed her. That silence burned more than any accusation ever could. One night, he stood by her door. He wanted to speak, to tell her the truth, to say he hadn't wanted this, that he had tried. But his feet wouldn't move. His pride, his guilt, his shame, they kept him rooted. Because whatever excuse he had now was 5 years too late. The house was unnervingly quiet. Rosaline stood before the full-length mirror in the senator's mansion, her reflection dressed in a black silk robe that kissed her skin like smoke. Her eyes, once filled with warmth, now gleamed with a cold, calculating fire. She had almost forgotten what vengeance tasted like, but now it was sweet on her tongue. She knew he was watching. He always was. The soft creak of the door every night, the way his footsteps hovered just beyond her reach. He couldn't resist her, not anymore. And tonight, she would push him to the edge. What she didn't know was, Junho was already at the edge. He couldn't get her out of his head. Every time she walked past, every time her voice laced the air with icy elegance, it haunted him. The weight of the past, what he did, what he allowed, tormented his soul. And now, it was starting to seep into his marriage. At home, he couldn't look at his wife, not with sincerity. He barely spoke to her anymore, barely touched her. Her warm hands felt like chains. Her voice, just noise. His heart, though unwilling to admit it out loud, had already returned to Rosaline, drawn back like a moth to a deadly flame. Then it happened. One afternoon, after a charity brunch, his wife returned home early. She opened the room door only to see Junho pressed against Rosaline, his hand gently brushing a strand of hair from her face, eyes lost in hers. It wasn't just passion, it was familiarity, a connection that cut deeper than skin. His wife gasped and walked out. Junho turned, guilt crashing over his face. Rosaline, ever composed, offered only a knowing smile. But then her voice dropped, chilling and deliberate. "You know I found the witness, right?" she whispered. "The one you shot and knows exactly who shot her. She's willing to talk now, to testify. I would reopen that case. Junho." Everything could come crumbling down. His face turned pale. "You wouldn't dare," he said, voice trembling. Her smile widened. "Try me." The silence that followed was worse than any scream. Stay tuned for what next. If this story gripped your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more unforgettable twists. Your support keeps the stories alive. This is the Afro Love Diaries, where every heartbeat tells a story.